Sudan remains caught in a deadly conflict now in its third year. Millions have been displaced and tens of thousands of others killed, with the conflict triggering one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world today. In our special segment, we take a closer look at the crisis. The African Union-led talks were expected to begin today in Addis Ababa. Many hoped they would pave the way for an end to the conflict and a peaceful democratic transition. Our correspondent Naba Moudine is in Port Sudan, where she relocated from the capital Khartoum 2 years ago after the conflict erupted in April 2023. Naba, what do you have for us? We'll reconnect with Naba a little later. We also have experts in Cairo and Nairobi who will help us explore what the expected summit in Addis Ababa was to signify for the future of Sudan and the wider region. Our segment begins now. Talks aimed at ending the conflict that were to be held in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, have been postponed. The African Union spokesperson Nur Mohammed Sheikh says the talks, which were to go on for 5 days starting today, Monday, were pushed back to allow for more consultations. The 2.5-year struggle for power between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces has displaced about 12 million people and killed thousands of civilians, according to a UN human rights report. The meeting that was to be convened by the AU alongside IGAD, the Arab League, and the UN has been billed as a step towards harmonizing civilian positions ahead of a wider political process. Well, let's bring in and reconnect with Naba Moudine, our reporter in Port Sudan, for more on the ongoing conflict and the mediation efforts to end the conflict. Naba, if you can hear me, thank you for joining us here on Africa Live. Let's start with the obvious, Naba. The African Union was due to start 5 days of talks on the conflict today. What are you hearing from the Sudanese authorities, and what are the expectations of the Sudanese people?
Actually, after the news about the meeting, the AU Sudanese dialogue has been postponed. Some people were frustrated because these meetings are part of the Quad plan to resolve the Sudanese crisis. It's a part of the initiative of United States, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, to resolve the Sudanese crisis. So after postponing these important meetings, some Sudanese people feel frustrated, but while others believe this is the right way because people were so conservative about the participation of some of the political parties and some of the civilian groups. The Sudanese authorities, there is no official comment by the Sudanese authorities in this, but the pro-military groups, they held a meeting in Port Sudan yesterday saying that they are not engaging in these talks, or they conditioned some conditions regarding the participation of these talks. Also, Sumud bloc conditions the participation of these talks, and of course the African Union excluded some political groups, including the Islamists who were part of the former regime of Omar al-Bashir. So on the ground there is frustration, war continues, devastation is hitting the country in all aspects of lives, and but some people believe that the Quad Mabrod, of course, will find its way to resolve the Sudanese crisis and push on all the political parties and the Sudanese stakeholders to launch the talks again and sit in one negotiation table very soon.
All right, Naba Moudine in Port Sudan, thanks for that. So where is Sudan currently? 2.5 years since the conflict broke out, the army has recaptured huge swaths of territory once held by the rival paramilitary rapid support forces. The government has now embarked on a process to restore basic services to the capital Khartoum, where it is due to return this month. But as CGTN's Robert Nagila reports, fighting between the government forces and the RSF is still going on in the southern and western regions.
In March this year, the Sudan Armed Forces recaptured the capital Khartoum and large parts of central and eastern Sudan from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The RSF, meanwhile, pulled back its forces in what it described as a tactical retreat towards the Darfur region. Khartoum was devastated by the fighting. Public and energy infrastructure had either been destroyed or damaged. In August, Sudan's Prime Minister Hamil Idris held his first cabinet meeting in the capital and announced that the federal government would begin returning to Khartoum in October. The government had relocated to the Red Sea city of Port Sudan 4 months after fighting broke out in the capital. Idris says restoring essential services and ensuring adequate security is his government's priority. However, rebuilding the capital will cost tens of billions of dollars. Local media reports say Khartoum's international airport will reopen later this month.
The government's next priorities include reconstruction, strengthening the economy, preserving citizen security and encouraging the voluntary return of displaced persons and refugees.
According to a UN Security Council briefing last week, fierce clashes between the SAF and the RSF continue in El Fasher in Darfur and the Kordofan region. At the center of Sudan, Kordofan is home to some of the country's largest oil fields and has become a major front line. In the western Darfur region, El Fasher has been under siege by the RSF since 2024. An expert explains its significance in the ongoing conflict.
Fasher is two things today. It is historically the capital of a big part of Darfur. It's the capital of North Darfur. But it is also at present the last city in the whole of Darfur where the Sudanese armed forces still have a hold and still have a garrison which has held out throughout the period of the civil war. And if El Fasher falls, then in essence, the country is split into two. In essence, the RSF under Hemeti controls almost the entirety of Darfur together with his allies.
In August, the RSF declared a parallel government in Darfur and areas under its control, but this was quickly rejected by the UN Security Council. Robert Nagila, CGTN.
For a better understanding of the AU mediation talks, we are joined by Dr. Hassan Kanenje, Director at the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, and Sarah Kira, who is the Director of the European North African Center for Research. Both of you, you're very welcome to Africa Live. Thank you for joining us via Zoom. Dr. Kanenje, let's start with you. Let's get you into this conversation. Dr. Kanenje, what were the key objectives of the summit due to open in Addis Ababa, and why did the African Union choose this particular moment to mediate, even though the meeting has since been postponed? Doctor?
I didn't get the question clearly, but can you repeat the question, please?
Doctor, let's talk about the key objectives of the summit that were due to open in Addis Ababa. And of course, why did the African Union, number one, choose this particular moment to mediate, even though the meeting has been postponed?
Yeah, this is coming against the backdrop of an emerging consensus that there is a need for ceasefire and to allow for humanitarian intervention. And critically, I think, as demonstrated by the recent statement by the Quad, and the kind of efforts being made thus far. And so this part of the objectives is, one, to ensure they increase, especially the civilian stakeholders in the peace process, but also expand the engagement in ways in which it's going to create sustainable peace. Two, to ride on the momentum that has been created thus far by the current engagements, especially by the Quad, to ensure that the regional bodies such as IGAD and the African Union, of course, they are going to help guide this process, because in the absence of the regional agency, it may be complicated down the line in trying to arrive at a very sensible and sustainable resolution.
All right, let's bring Sarah into this conversation. Sarah, you've heard what Dr. Kanenje has had to say. Same question to you. Will the outcomes of the AU meeting, when it's finally held, contribute to the organization's diplomatic push to end the war and possibly pave the way for a civilian-led constitutional order? How do you see it?
Well, allow me to break down the answer to this question, please, and shed a little bit of light on the Quad and the AU and their coordination with regional bodies and regional powers. Well, this conflict has been really fierce, and the humanitarian crisis is rising, especially with the hostilities of rapid support forces against Darfur, Kordofan region, as mentioned in the report. So there has been a plan put by the Quad and the regional bodies of Africa, and it's totally an African matter. So the plan is to have a transitional process, and transparent one, and an inclusive one. The reason why the AU meeting has been delayed a little bit is that because the civilian power didn't agree to sit together, okay? The situation in Sudan, reaching an agreement to cease fire has been a little bit elusive because of the conflicting parties. Each and every one of them wants to seize more power, territorial power, and consolidate their power on the land. That's why we have seen the crisis in Al-Fashir, the humanitarian crisis with UN estimation of rising famine, possibility of genocide. So the plan has been put and forced a humanitarian truce to let the humanitarian access to aid to the civilians, especially that in Al-Fashir there are UN estimation of 260,000 civilians, including children, encircled inside the city of Al-Fashir, northern of Darfur, by rapid support forces. So this is not acceptable anymore, and the AU here, along with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, and some European actors as well, are working to coordinate and pressure both conflicting parties to cease fire and first of all, to allow humanitarian aid access to civilians there in order to contain the humanitarian situation. Inclusive in meaning that Egypt and Saudi Arabia and UAE in this matter would not allow or give any space to the conflicting powers on the ground to join any future government, all right? But they still pressuring to seize the fire and include them in talks to seize the fire, but not in the future of governing Sudan. And the AU here, African Union, works as a coordinator of all the efforts in the region.
All right, Sarah Kira, Dr. Kinenje, thank you both for your insight and analysis. We shall continue our discussions in just a moment, but briefly, let's take a break from the discussions and see the timeline on the diplomacy efforts, as Daniel Arab Moy reports.
Sudan's civil war broke out in April 2023 over what was reported to be a power struggle between Sudan's armed forces and a major paramilitary group known as the Rapid Support Forces. Diplomatic attempts to end the conflict have been a near constant, with the Saudi city of Jeddah, led by the United States and Saudi Arabia, being the primary stage for talks. Just weeks after the outbreak, there was a brief sign of hope as both the army and the RSF signed a declaration of commitment to protect civilian populations during their conflict. In the following weeks, a series of short-term ceasefires were negotiated in Jeddah, and it seemed for a while like a solution might be found. However, the talks were suspended after both sides repeatedly failed to honor their commitments, and the war quickly escalated and expanded from there. In early July 2023, the Regional Intergovernmental Authority on Development, or IGAD, proposed a roadmap for a resolution. The proposal included the deployment of an African high-level panel composed of the leaders of Kenya, South Sudan, and Djibouti to mediate between the warring parties. However, the Sudanese army-led government objected to the inclusion of Kenya as a mediator, citing bias towards the RSF, a claim Nairobi strenuously denied. The African Union has also been involved despite earlier suspending Sudan. It is sought to coordinate with IGAD and the UN under the framework of an expanded mechanism. Attempts to reconvene the Jeddah talks throughout late 2023 and early 2024 yielded little progress. Early last year, a new informal grouping emerged, the Quad for Sudan, consisting of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Their goal has been to unify international pressure on the two factions in Sudan. In mid-September of this year, the Quad, as well as including Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, reaffirmed support for the 2023 Jeddah Agreement as a framework for Sudan. They called for a 3-month humanitarian truce to be pursued through the Jeddah process and the launch of a civilian-led transition process within 9 months. The diplomatic push to end the conflict in Sudan continues, and the hope for a lasting solution remains alive. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, to continue with the conversation, let's bring back our guest, Dr. Hassan Kanenje, director at the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies, and Sarah Kira, who is the director of the European North African Center for Research. Dr. Kanenje, we'll start with you once again. Dr. Kanenje, do you feel the African Union is well placed in the mediation, considering the very slow progress of its efforts?
I didn't get the question clearly. Kindly repeat.
Doctor, do you feel the African Union is well placed in this mediation effort process, considering the slow progress it has so far in its efforts?
Well, I think these efforts are going to be important, and what they are going to do, they're going, I think, to contribute significantly in unifying something that I think many people have been calling about in terms of harmonizing the United Nations, African Union, IGAD, as well as the Quad efforts, because these multiplicity of initiatives have actually not served the peace process in Sudan, very well. And so I think the resolutions are going to emerge from this are going to be very central in informing and contributing to that process that may just, I think, give us a green light that Sudan may go back to the path of transition as it was meant, several years ago.
Okay. Let's bring Sarah into this conversation as well. Sarah, the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have previously pushed a separate process. There's also the initiative of the quartet of the U.S., Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates. How different are these processes from the AU, and why do you think they both continue to struggle?
Well, let me tell you again. It's now the plan that has been put by the Quad and the regional bodies to be done throughout the upcoming 9 months. It starts with a 3-month truce for humanitarian access. It's no different. It comes within a plan. It's complementary. The AU and the African Union, the UN, and the Quad countries are all pressuring both conflicting parties to cease fire and allow humanitarian access. So it's no different, it's just complementary. And especially because the conflicting parties in Sudan are very stubborn, and they have caused all the ceasefire agreements of before and any peacemaking efforts, they have cracked it down, especially because each and every party of them is accused of having backers with either for political, strategic, economic interest, or with military ties to either rapid support forces or to the Sudan armed forces. So now to have a more of an inclusive transitional process, all of these parties have to be involved, and they all agree on the roadmap and the 9 months plan put to Sudan, because there is no other way out of this war unless all the international community pressures, and especially with the regional bodies. Sudan has been held from its membership in the AU since 2023. So this is some kind of political pressure. The parties have been stubborn again for seize of power, but now with this collaborative pressure and a very transparent plan with all these regional powers and bodies working on the plan, it might work this time, hopefully.
All right. Dr. Hassan Kanenje and Sarah Kira, thank you both for your time. Let's continue as diplomatic efforts struggle to make headway. The humanitarian situation inside Sudan continues to worsen. The number of people displaced internally since January now stands at more than 1.5 million. And that's according to a new report from the UN International Organization for Migration. It's primarily due to an increase in people returning to their home states, mainly in central Sudan, where pockets of relative safety have emerged, including in the capital Khartoum, after these areas came under army control. Many Sudanese refugees are also deciding to return home from other countries, such as Egypt. Naba Muddin again reports from Khartoum.
Jamal Ahmed was displaced for 2 years. The 70-year-old fled with his family to Egypt after the war broke out in Khartoum in April 2023. He returned after the military recaptured the capital from the paramilitary rapid support forces, and while he got a shock at what he saw, Jamal still says he wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I returned from Egypt 2 weeks ago. I found my house looted. I found the neighborhood sick and in despair. There's no power or water now, and it's difficult to get basic services. But I decided to return home, to at least die here. Nowhere is like your home.
Since the war started, more than 12 million Sudanese have been forcibly displaced, the largest such crisis in the world, according to the UN. Jamal is one of millions of people who are now hoping to rebuild their lives back in Sudan.
At the end of July, the total number of people who sought refuge abroad but who have now returned to Sudan is an estimated 1.5 million.
However, getting home is only part of the challenge. Many believe the hard work begins now. The fighting continues elsewhere. The economy has been devastated and the humanitarian crisis continues.
We need to start from scratch. The youth who work abroad helped in installing a solar energy system to help restore water and power. They are helping with the health crisis as well by sending money and medication. People are doing everything by themselves and with their own money amid all the challenges.
Many of the returnees have came back with nothing and need financial or other support to get going again.
And now people are starting to return on top of that. So it is going to take time, it's going to take resources, and it's going to take a lot of hard work to help this city get back on its feet again. Since reestablishing our presence in Khartoum, including opening this office just 3 months ago, WFP has scaled up our operations significantly. Between May and June, we managed to scale up to 1 million people who were reaching through the range of activities that I've highlighted: community kitchens, general food distributions, nutrition programs for mothers and children.
Those people like Jamal who do return home have to confront a conflict that is intensifying in Kordofan, where attacks on power and water infrastructure continue. The spread of diseases like malaria and dengue fever, and their hometowns and cities that have been destroyed. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Khartoum.
Besides the fight over political power in Sudan, there are also external interests and struggles to control some of the country's natural resources, especially gold. The government has tightened trading on gold in areas under its control, same as the RSF. Gold remains a key commodity for Sudan's economy and its people, with exports potentially providing much needed revenues and foreign currency for the administration. Now, the government has decided to act with a new policy aimed at strict regulation. But will it have the desired effect is the question. Earlier, we spoke to Ken Kichinga, chief economist at the Mentoria Economics, on the impact the conflict has had on Sudan's economy. Let's take a listen.
Inflation in Sudan stands at about 118.9%. If you look at 1 kilogram of meat, it costs about 26,000 Sudanese pounds. That's roughly about $43. If the currency has taken a massive hit and Sudan faces the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. There are several options that the government can consider to restore the Sudanese economy. Number one, there has to be a clear path to peace to ensure there's tranquility in the country. And number two, the productive sectors of the economy have to be revived. Transport infrastructure has taken a major hit in the last 2 years of war. So the productive sectors need to be invested to be able to create more jobs. As we speak, the government is only getting revenue from the mineral sector, which is being used to fund government operations as well as the war. So being able to create and diversify the economy and to create more jobs can be a quick path to peace and prosperity.
The education sector in the country has not been spared either. According to the UN, Sudan faces the world's largest education crisis, with at least 19 million children out of school and 90% of schools closed nationwide. Many educational facilities have been looted, destroyed, or turned into shelters, seriously disrupting learning. It's not just students who have been hit hard by the crisis. Thousands of teachers have also been displaced. Many have lost their jobs and others have been killed. Most of them have gone without salaries and allowances for more than a year. This comes as the world marked Teachers' Day on Sunday under the theme, "Collaboration is key to making teachers thrive." Muawiyah Abdel Rakik, a teacher in Umdurman, shares his story.
المعلمين حقيقة شغالين في ظروف في غاية التعقيد يعني.
I was displaced to the River Nile state. I'm actually from the Khartoum area. I was closely following what was happening from a distance. We were truly concerned about the situation in Khartoum, Omdurman, and Bahri. When I came back, we were worried about our fellow teachers who had also returned under extremely complex and difficult security conditions. The evidence for this is that some teachers were martyred. One of our fellow teachers was struck in the back by a shell, which caused his death.
المدرسة دي برضو اتعرضت لإضرار لغزايف.
There were schools that were hit by shells and bullets. Some classrooms were completely destroyed as a result of the heavy gunfire and shells that fell on the rooms from above, causing great devastation. The level of destruction varies from total to partial. There are schools that we even discovered had been turned into graves in the western bank of the Nile area.
آخر رحلة أنا نزحت مناطق قريبة، نزحت ولاية نهر النيل.
When we returned to school here in Khartoum state, we immediately engaged in our studies and were admitted to the education administration. However, teachers are truly working under extremely difficult conditions currently. Also, due to the lack of salaries, especially for those in Khartoum state. We've not been paid for more than a year and 6 months. There are also voices calling for a salary increase, so there must be an agreement to raise salaries. We are calling for the war to stop today. We, as teachers, cannot work except in safe and stable environment, and the educational process will not be successful without true stability.
Preservationists are scrambling to restore museums and cultural artifacts destroyed in the ongoing conflict. According to officials, more than 20 museums across Sudan have been looted or destroyed, and the estimated value of the losses is around $110 million. And with limited resources to restore such significant cultural heritage, rebuilding or having them back anytime soon seems unlikely. CGTN's Caroline B. reports.
Priceless artifacts dating back centuries used to stand in Sudan's National Museum in Khartoum, but many of them are now either destroyed or looted. Only the large, heavy objects that couldn't be so easily carried were left behind. Preservationists who returned to the city after the army took over Khartoum sift through the wreckage, trying to restore what they can.
The museum was extremely damaged. A lot of artifacts that are very, very important for us were stolen. Any piece in the museum has a story, and what was stolen was extremely crucial for us as archaeologists. A number of pieces were stolen from the main storage rooms.
About 4,000 antiquities have been counted missing across the country, with preservationists saying some have been smuggled into neighboring countries. The museum's open-air courtyard includes multiple temples and other artifacts moved to Khartoum from the country's north in the 1960s. This was to preserve them from flooding caused by the construction of Egypt's Aswan High Dam. Puhen Temple, built around 1500 BC, is one of the most spectacular. It sustained damage, and authorities are working to repair it.
The impact on the temples was major. It appeared in the roofs and the external glass surrounding the temple. As the team in charge of antiquities and museums, we were conducting some maintenance, but with very limited resources. We urge specialized authorities or the Ministry of Culture and Media to give us a helping hand to finish the renovation.
Another museum, Khartoum's Republican Palace, also suffered damage and is now filled with charred wreckage. Antique cars, including the first ever in Sudan, sit amid debris, with windows and headlamps smashed. Authorities estimate that the cost of restoring everything could be as high as $100 million, a sum that they are unlikely to obtain given the country's devastated economy. The other problem is the absence of foreign archaeological specialists who fled the country after the war began and who may not feel it's safe to return. Caroline B., CGTN.
In other news still coming from Sudan, the International Criminal Court is set to deliver its verdict today on a Sudanese militia chief. Ali Mohammed Ali Abdel Rahman faces 31 counts of crimes, including rape, murder, and torture, allegedly carried out in Darfur between August 2003 and April 2004. Prosecutors say he was a leading member of Sudan's infamous Janjaweed militia who participated in multiple war crimes. 74 witnesses have given evidence during the trial that began in April 2022. He has denied all the charges, telling the court they have got the wrong man. Well, and that marks the end of our special segment on Sudan. Join us for a rerun on our 17G show later today.